Happy Saturday, everybody. Welcome to this Small Business Saturday edition of the Furthermore podcast. As you can see, if you are watching the video, this is our video podcast that we put out every weekend, focusing on a small business across our great nation. And I'm pretty sure this is the first, a publishing company, and I am so excited to bring on Brian Kohl. He's the CEO of Canon Press. Many of you probably have some of their books on your bookshelf, but they now have Canon Plus and a whole host of other products that they offer. So I'm looking very forward to this conversation with Brian. So stick around after this commercial break. We'll be back with him. Welcome, everybody, to this Small Business Saturday edition of Furthermore with Amanda Head. So excited that you are here with me. And many of you know that I love to read, and I typically have 2 to 3 books in rotation at a time. For me as a reader, that just helps keep me stimulated. So I'll read, I do my daily Bible reading, and then I'll read 20 minutes of another book. Some people know this about me. In October, I have this yearly tradition where I like to read either classic horror literature like Dracula, or right now I actually changed it up because I'm reading Bill O'Reilly's Killing the Witches. But every October I like to read something that's kind of spooky themed. But I love to read. It is my favorite medium to absorb information. And so this might actually be a first for the podcast, bringing on someone who is involved with a publishing company. So very thrilled to bring in Brian Kohl. He is the CEO of Canon Press. Brian, thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Amanda. Like you, reading's a big part of what we do here, so it'll be fun to talk.
I love that. And I had no idea. This company has been around for over 30 years. You guys have put out so many books. Just give my audience kind of a background of Canon Press.
Yeah, so we're a small conservative publishing house up in the chimney of Idaho, and yeah, we did start in the late '80s, and really part of the goal is just to support community work, the community building work, the Christian community that we want to build. And also, what Canon really has is a view that all of Christ is for all of life. So a big part of what we publish means you're not just going to find us writing, family centric or theology work, but you'll also find us publishing fiction, like we talked about. We do republish some versions of the classics like Dracula. You'll find logic texts, kids' books, basically a little bit of everything. And especially for publishing in a world post-pandemic, it's an ambitious task. So we're excited to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you guys always been based in Idaho?
Yep, always been in Moscow, Idaho. So
Moscow,
right up,
Idaho.
yep.
Beautiful, beautiful. So this is a company that's been around for our audience since 1988. So you guys have been kind of a staple in the Christian conservative publishing community for a while. What's your favorite book that you guys have ever put out? Or I guess actually 2-part question, your favorite book and the most successful book.
Yeah, those are both great questions. One of the books that people mostly come to us to find would be a book called Reforming Marriage by one of our top authors, which is Pastor Douglas Wilson, is the pastor of my church, and his book Reforming Marriage has been basically a Christ-centered way to approach marriage and reboot marriage for many people for a long time. And that's kind of the book that we intro to everybody. I'm a dad with 5 young boys and then a baby daughter. So one of my favorite books that we publish is definitely going to be Future Men, which is a book about just little boys are going to grow up sometime, and when they grow up, they're going to be the men that have to be good men. And so that book is about what to do there.
Okay,
Um,
you know what? I think that that's a great starting point for a conversation that ties in with something that we are seeing culturally that to me is very disturbing, especially in this conversation where we're talking about having the possibility of a female president. And my audience knows that I have very scandalous opinions about any woman being uh, president. But
are
I'm
you
gonna
allowed to say that in California? I didn't think you were allowed to say that.
I have to whisper it. I have to whisper it. Listen, and I'm not one of these. I don't think that no woman is capable of being president. I think that Margaret Thatcher is a perfect example of a steely woman who had the emotional and intellectual fortitude to lead a nation. But I think that most women are, anyway. That's not part of this conversation right now, and I don't want to get myself in trouble again. But I want to ask you about this age that we are living in where men are constantly knocked down, especially straight men, oftentimes white men. It's the patriarchy, it's toxic masculinity. Um, that book that you were talking about, Future Men, talk to us about how that counters all of the messaging that men are constantly getting bombarded with these days.
Yeah, I mean, I think a good part of our current culture's push has been to mix up the two genders and try to make them into one homogenous thing. So rather than allowing us to discuss gender roles and how God made the world, one of the more contentious books we published had the simple title, "It's Good to Be a Man." That doesn't mean it's bad to be a woman,
No.
but it's just a book for men. What does God want you to do in your situation, both your ability to find vocation that matters. What should you do as a husband? The questions of leadership in our culture are other ones as well. So, Future Men is kind of just a launching point for that.
Yeah.
One of the most helpful takeaways for me is as a parent of boys, is when to tell a boy, hey, your instincts were good, but
Mm,
you went about it the wrong way. So there's
yeah.
a great story in there, I think, in Future Men. Teddy Roosevelt found a little boy who had been fighting on the playground. And the boy had punched a kid, and Teddy said, why'd you do that? And he said, well, he was insulting my little sister. And so Teddy Roosevelt, I think, gave him a quarter, just like, hey, your instincts are good, fighting on the playground, not generally good, but protecting your little sister, go for it.
Yeah.
Here's the money. And this was before Biden, so the quarter was worth a whole lot more than it is now. So
Yeah, of course. Of course. What do you think it is about the left and just, and I don't even want to call it liberalism because I feel like today's liberalism is very different from classical liberalism, but today's progressive left, what do you think it is about strong uh men who have a propensity to lead that threatens them so much?
yeah, I mean, if you look at how the Bible treats men, there's multiple ways to ruin a guy. And one of the ways of ruining a guy is just to straight up kill him, like Pharaoh.
Yeah.
In the Old Testament, Pharaoh killed all the Hebrew boys because he said, "Hey, they're not going to be problems if we do that." Another way of course, is to subvert them. So if you pay attention to how Absalom, David's treasonous son, how he would flatter and lie and basically tell men that they were deserving more than they were getting. That's sort of the two flip sides that we have in our culture. You're either going to flatter kids or men with porn and flatter them with what they can do in video games, basically sedate, or you're going to kill and imprison or beat down or alienate. And that's kind of, I think, just part of how the enemies approached our current culture. And it happens with women too. It's just in our current situation, we're in a place where we've flipped hard the other way, and masculinity has become the target. And I think
Mm,
that's because, well, at least in our current culture, the masculine, the men who are trying to serve the Lord are people who are a little harder to accommodate into the current mission.
yeah. When I look
Um,
at what's happening and the degradation of men and male qualities that are by and large supremely male, when I look at what is happening, and I don't mean to be all chicken little, the sky is falling, but I see pretty dire consequences if this is carried out much further. Do you?
yeah, we've published recently this year a book called Leadership and Emotional Sabotage, which is just a
Mm,
question basically of how anxiety and an effective leader is constantly derailed by sabotage. And that's
mm,
what I am seeing in our culture. We've seen it all the way down from the top levels of power all the way down to local school boards and consequences that when someone takes a stand for right, the sabotage comes out.
mm,
Beware that the teeth will come out. And a big part of why Canon Press exists is because we think the average person is not going to be running for president, but the average person is going to have a family and is going to be raising kids and is going to be starting businesses and trying to be effective. And we really want to be something that supplies resources, outfits, the ability to be faithful wherever you are.
Yeah.
Many of us are not going to have a chance to run a political campaign or be involved in that, but we all have a chance to make our communities better. And faithfulness in a community is like leaven in a loaf, and it grows over time. And that's really where a lot of our impetus toward Canon Plus, our app, and all our book publishing, our topics from politics all the way to parenting and in between with children's books. That's what we're trying to do. Give average people the tools to be faithful where they are.
I love that so much. I want to highlight something that's happening next month. I assume your most prolific author, Doug Wilson, the founder of the company, has a book coming out next month called Keep Your Kids: How to Raise Strong Kids in an Age of Therapeutic Sentimentalism. What is therapeutic sentimentalism?
Yeah, what a title. That's classic Doug. He wants to make sure we get a lot of sauce in that title. So keep your kids makes sense. How to raise kids in an age of therapeutic sentimentalism. Man, it's just what you were talking about, Amanda. It's that desire to sedate. Okay, so it's this fake niceness. It's we see that with Kamala with the idea,
Mhm.
my campaign's about joy. And then you find out that that sort of niceness doesn't mean anything in reality, and it's used as a panacea to take care of all ills, and it's used to sedate both men and women so that we don't do the idea that therapy, that however you are feeling is the way you'll feel forever, and we just have to manage it, as opposed to actual maturity. I think Pastor Wilson sees that view of therapy as the opposite of what
Mm.
a faithful parent is supposed to do.
Boy, and I was just hearing a news story about, I don't know if this person is like a certified therapist or a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Frankly, they're all kind of part of the same blob to me. But this professional in psychiatric care who conducted a study on the repercussions of all of this gender nonsense with kids, and then I don't know how the study ultimately got out, but she didn't want to publish the study because it went against all of her woke ideology with respect to gender. And it feels like this is a cancer that has really taken over our society, because it almost feels like parents want to be able to check off a box with their children. So they will, even before a child has any type of diagnosis, and I would argue that that overdiagnosis is happening to an extreme degree right now. But parents will say, "Oh, well, I have ADD, so my 4-year-old son probably has it too," and they send them off to a shrink, and then the shrink is the first person to come to them and say, "Well, your child might have questions about gender," when in fact the child is just a child, and one day they want to be a raccoon, and the next day they want to be a Sharpie.
Yes, I think you've definitely touched on something that's going on there. And for this book, Keep Your Kids, one of the main things that I thought that plays into this is just Pastor Wilson asking the question, "Hey, what do you want for your kids?
Mm.
Do you want your kids to be happy? Obviously, is your vision that you're just going to all kind of grow up together around the table, or do you have a positive vision as well that goes toward what can we do with our country? What can you
Mm.
do in your space? Is are your children going to be joining the fight along with you in the future? And if so, are you readying them for this world, like you just said, Amanda, that you head into Walmart and see a kid wearing fox ears and a foxtail, and it's not a Halloween costume, it's a mentally disturbed kid, and
Yeah.
everything in that kid's life is set up to tell the kid they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And that right there, that therapeutic sentimentalism, not willing to take a hard stand against what's wrong, but instead wanting to be nice, sentimental about a child
Hmm.
who thinks they're a fox.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I was talking earlier this week to the Senate candidate, the Republican Senate candidate in Ohio, Bernie Moreno, and we were talking about how this election cycle, especially for Republicans, people like him, like Bernie Moreno and Donald Trump, that this seems to be the election of hard truths, where you have Republicans out there who are saying the things that need to be said out loud, that a lot of people have been feeling for a very long time. The hard truth that we can't let illegal immigrants just flood into this country. The very hard truth that we might have to send some of them home. The hard truth that no, you can't tell your kids that they can be anything, because in this day and age, you will be sending them down the road to be a furry. And I was talking to Bernie about this because this is obviously playing a huge role in this election. But I want to ask you about, and I don't want to get too political, but I suppose this is more a philosophical conversation. But there was a study that was done, it's earlier this summer. I think it was maybe in August. And it was an organization out of Arizona, I believe. And they talked to students, young kids in a blue state, which was New Jersey, a red state, which was Texas, and a swing state, which was Arizona. And in talking to the children whose parents were Republican, they were asked how they felt about people who support Kamala Harris. And they were like, oh, well, we think it's silly, we support Trump, blah, 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 blah. The kids whose parents were Democrats used terms like Hitler and evil. And I thought to myself, Brian, these are kids, and I think they were like 6 or 7 years old, that the term Hitler and evil should not even be in their vernacular. That should not even be a part of their vocabulary yet, but they are being fed this hate by their parents. Do you see this broadening divide between children in this country and maybe families in general raised with conservative values versus liberal values?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've heard it described this way, and this may get us into trouble, but as we've talked about, we're fine.
It's fine.
We're all comfortable with the deep state, right? The idea that there's a bureaucracy that moves on and on, the 20 million federal
Yeah.
employees who are not elected, but instead are furthering agendas. The real deep state in our country is public education.
Mm,
And the idea that your kids are handed off to somebody who is neutral or at best and overtly secular, which is what we've seen recently. And
yeah.
the idea that that's the real deep state that is catechizing kids to be the kind of cogs in the machine rather than full-throated individuals who are able to speak their mind, stand up for the truth, and are willing to love somebody despite a difference of opinion.
Yeah.
That's where that real problem is happening. A big part of what we do is educational for that reason. Um, uh, uh, the idea that your children are being formed and catechized by somebody else is at the heart of what's wrong with our country today.
Yeah. Yeah, it's and I want to get back to that in a moment, but I want to bring the conversation back to the product line for Canon Press, because you guys not only offer physical books, and look, I'm a romantic at heart when it comes to books. I like to have the physical books because I'm a note taker and I like to scribble in the margins and I like to underline and highlight and things like that. But you guys also
Absolutely.
offer audiobooks, right?
Yes. Yeah, we do. So a little bit of industry stats, which are kind of interesting. The ebook revolution is not happening. We've had ebooks. You're safe, okay? I
Yeah,
agree
I
with
love to
you.
hear
I'm
that.
the same spot as you. When we release books, we like to put foil stamp, dust jacket, spot gloss, even sometimes the belly bands on the books
Yeah.
with the fun fabrics. We're all about that. The physical artifact of the book is key. So I'm
Yeah.
with you there. I think what we've seen is that ebooks have about we people were saying, hey, it's the end of the print book, but really we're still in the high 70s for print book sales.
Wow.
The big growth has been audiobooks, like you said, and we have Canon Plus, which is a streaming service where you can find all of our audiobooks. You can also find all of our video content. We have a wider range of stuff. So we've got the Tintin cartoons for children. We have Hayao Miyazaki's Sherlock Hound, which is a show. I don't know if you're familiar with any of Miyazaki's and Studio Ghibli stuff, but some
No, but that
amazing
sounds
classic
amazing.
cartoons. And then, we've got that on one side, and then we also have, Pastor Wilson was on Tucker Carlson Network earlier this year. So we have some interviews with footage behind the scenes of him visiting Tucker. We have interviews with Joel Salatin, the lunatic farmer. So we really are just having fun with everything possible because we really do believe theology comes at your fingertips. So if what you believe is not affecting what you do, then you don't really believe it. And that's really kind of the mission behind Canon Plus. So
Awesome.
that's what we are have leaned into as part of what people were thinking is the digital revolution, but we're seeing books are around and audiobooks are growing, and so are shows. So we're trying it all.
Okay. All right. I have to pick apart or at least dig into
Oh,
something
sorry,
you were just
that was a huge flood. I get excited about everything we do.
I love that.
So
Okay, let's start with 1010 cartoons. What is that?
yeah, so Hergé was a Belgian comic book creator from the 1900s. So Tintin is the stories of a real reporter, a reporter from the old days who basically goes around the world with his little dog Snowy and catches bad guys. And that's kind of an ultimate show there that we are so thrilled to have on Canon Plus. So yeah, Tintin Adventures. I've been showing them to my kids, and it's just imagination food for them. So yeah, kids content, lots of different cartoons. Some more familiar stuff, Franklin Turtle, Babar the elephant, if you're familiar. A
Oh, I
bunch of stuff
remember
like that.
Babar. I used to love Babar.
Yep, us too. Underrated cartoon for sure, but the
Absolutely.
Babar movies are on Canon Plus as well. A huge
Beautiful.
variety of classic Looney Tunes cartoons as well.
Oh man, you know what? My husband and I were just talking about this again recently because I feel like we have had this repetitive conversation about how once we have kids, we want to find some location, some digital platform that just has cartoons from when we grew up. Because you look at cartoons nowadays and they're, for the most part, not nearly as witty or creative or inventive. And the old Looney Tunes stuff, I mean,
Yeah,
those cartoons from the 80s and late 80s and even into the early 90s were so good. And you nowadays, I mean, you're lucky to find one that doesn't have some type of woke element in it. But even if you
yeah.
do, they just don't seem like they have that creative zest that they did back then.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're totally right. If you compare something like Daniel Tiger, right, which, compare Daniel Tiger back to a classic Looney Tunes. Now, there's some elements that I do have to talk to my kids about when we show those classic Looney Tunes of like, okay, well, let's not see you using that particular wolf whistle, that we just saw in the Bugs Bunny cartoon, right? But at the same time, it's not sort of I think the word is pablum. It's like chewed up oatmeal character that the
Yeah.
Daniel Tiger cartoon has at its worst. But yeah, a big part of classic cartoons, we're putting more and more on. And, I think we've got Pippi Longstocking as well. We have the classic Superman cartoons from the 80s.
Oh
Um,
man.
so, it does feel like another thing we like to say around here is story always wins. So
Yeah.
as you are catechizing and raising up not just your kids, but also the people around you, what's the story you're telling? God is an amazing storyteller. He tells a world that's full of tons of different characters. You, me, everybody, characters from nations all the way down to bugs. And so if you are a human who loves the world God made, you also will be interested in the stories that are everywhere.
I love that. Count me in because I do love those stories that God made, and I love this world that God created for us to tell stories in. We're going to take a very quick break, but we're going to be back in just a minute. Welcome back, everybody. We are here with the CEO of Canon Press, Brian Kohl. Brian, you were talking about one of the philosophies of Canon Press, which is story always wins. Do you think that that's something that Hollywood has lost touch of?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think this isn't Hollywood, but I think if I can, even over, well, here, let me take one test study here. One of our recent picture books we just released is called Crispin's Rainy Day. And it's a story basically about a kid who is going on an adventure and he's really trying to make sure his little sister doesn't come along. He's jumping through a hole in the cloud, jumps through a puddle, I should say, in his backyard and falls into a world of pirate frogs. So, right, exciting. What he doesn't realize is that his little sister follows him along with him. So, when he does find out, he's pretty upset.
Yes.
But that story right there, just the idea that a story has emotional growth for your characters, right? So this
Mhm.
kid, Crispin, needs to learn to get along with his little sister while still going on this adventure. And in fact, his sister will bring something to the adventure that he was missing. And in fact, they end up fighting a dragon, and Crispin finds out that really he was being a bit of a dragon when he left his little sister behind, right?
Yeah.
So that's an emotional journey, even a 32-page children's book
Yeah.
that say is very different from a typical storybook or story that Hollywood wants to tell, where the general message is, what is your emotion? What do you feel?
Hmm.
And that's the end, right?
Yeah.
So like, oh, you feel upset. That's the end of the story, right?
Yeah.
That's okay. Or like sometimes we feel happy, sometimes we feel sad. That's the worst of Hollywood's emotional catechism that they're trying to teach.
Yeah. It just seems like nowadays everything has some woke element to it, even if it's some type of kids movie. They just try to insert garbage into everything. So for us as believers, we have to really, really pay attention to what we are allowing our kids to consume. And honestly, it seeps into education. And I want to go back to something that you were saying a little while ago about this blob, the cabal, the establishment of public education. And I have a lot of conversation with Ryan Walters, who is the superintendent of public education in Oklahoma. And even though he is the superintendent of public education in Oklahoma, he, along with President Trump and a lot of Republicans, are floating the idea of abolishing the Department of Education. So you no longer have this federal umbrella lording over curriculum, the structure of teachers and principals in this country, the structure of school systems. Do you think that that is a wise thing to do? Because honestly, it's kind of like you're kind of scrapping the whole system, and you pretty much have to start from scratch if you do that.
Yep, you're right. A big part of our mission has been supporting classical Christian education, a network of hundreds of schools now, many thousands of graduates across the U.S. with great results. And then when you add homeschoolers in there, we're now talking about hundreds of thousands. And so the question of, yeah, do we nuke the Department of Education? I mean, the question you're asking is, do we want our children to be taught that men and women are interchangeable parts and that there's no vision for life that has goodness or meaning?
Mm,
Should we stop telling them that? The answer is 100% yes, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
the idea that parents need to be involved in what their kids are doing goes all the way back to Deuteronomy. And the Lord has a plan for how kids are raised, and that does not include a secular state trying to turn them into individual BBs that are atomized and basically catechized to think, in terms of black white groupthink.
Yeah. Hey, I want to ask you something that I've been philosophizing about in my own brain for a while, and that is that conservatives are kind of re-embracing the traditional family structure and also traditional forms of education. So a lot of homeschooling, I mean, homeschooling has just exploded across this country, even homeschooling co-ops, teaching at home, but also being a part of Christian schools. And you see almost 9 times out of 10 that a child who has been raised up in that type of educational environment performs better on standardized tests, has a better resume. They are the types of kids who, if they're homeschooling, they're only spending 3 hours in the classroom, aka at the breakfast table, and then they are spending time outside. They're running around barefoot, they're riding their bikes, they're, conversing with friends. And then on the other side, you have children who oftentimes, especially in urban communities, their parents are liberals. So I'm placing that in the liberal basket, where you have kids who are subject to a failing education system. I mean, just here in California, LAUSD, one of the largest school systems in the entire country, where less than 30% of kids have passing grades or are reading or performing math at grade level. So it almost seems like, Brian, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, you're going to have a situation where conservative kids or kids who were raised by conservatives, I hate to say it, are just going to have a better chance at success in life in general across the board over children who were raised by liberals.
Yeah, it's certainly a sobering fact to think that way. As parents, you want to give your kid the best start possible. And you're entirely right. I'm one half of the Stories of Soul Food podcast, which is basically a podcast about, that how do you feed kids? Like, and one of the things we've talked a lot about is just the sad apathy that has really affected teens and younger kids across our entire country, especially following the pandemic. And I think the breaking of a lot of the dreams and aspirations and goals, just a huge shaking of everything that was sturdy. And you're entirely right. Kids who are trained in a particular way, who are trained, to honor God and to try to serve the world and to read stories and to be interested in things, versus a kid who's apathetic and has been told to sit and stand and think what they're told to think. Unfortunately, yeah, I mean, I guess it's not unfortunately, it's just how the book of Proverbs is all about that.
Yeah.
You set your kid up in a particular way, and there's going to be a hard reckoning when you realize that you've ingrained apathy
Yeah.
in your children rather than an ingrained desire to succeed and a willingness to pursue opportunity, which is part of what made our nation great in the first place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. We've got to bounce out of here, but I want to make sure that everybody knows how they can find Canon Press and especially Canon Plus, because I have a feeling that a lot of especially parents in my audience are going to want to take advantage of that. So how can everybody sign up for that, subscribe?
Yeah, absolutely. Joincanonplus.com. Joincanonplus.com is the place. You can also find us on the app stores, really anywhere. We got a free trial so you can test it out and check out Tintin if you've never heard it before. Show it to your kids, get the kid approved test. And then also for yourself, watch Doug and Tucker or Joel Salatin, the Lunatic Farmer, and other good stuff dropping soon on Canon Plus.
Awesome. Awesome. And everybody, you can find them on Twitter at Canon Press. And I've had a kids book idea for a long time, so we might have to coordinate in the future on that.
I
Brian
love it.
Kohl, CEO of Canon Press, it's been such an honor having you here today. Thank you so much for all of this information about your company, all of the insight into what we are seeing today. And I think that Canon Press is providing an essential service to especially believers out there. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Amanda. I really appreciate it getting a chance to talk to somebody who is in touch with everything that's going on in the world, and good to
I'm
have you
trying to
on.
be. I'm trying to be. It's hard. Hey, we all have to pay much more attention these days and stay on the front lines, especially heading into November 5th. So hopefully we will start to see a bit of a shift in the culture in Washington, D.C. because right now and I guess for a long time it's really just been a minimum security prison for criminals in suits. And I certainly hope that changes sometime soon. Brian Kohl, thanks so much for joining us.
All right. Thank you, Amanda.
My pleasure. All right, everybody, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back after this. Welcome back, everybody. All right, I know it's Saturday, and for many of us who are deeply entrenched in the political process, we're really not even getting weekends. Last weekend, I actually had the whole weekend off because it was my anniversary, and my amazing husband whisked me away to a mountain town outside of Los Angeles, Lake Arrowhead, and we just had a wonderful, wonderful time. For the most part, I unplugged. I am kind of a Twitter addict and did a little bit of Twitter scrolling, the doom scrolling thing, but not for long at all, because we had such amazing food. We hung out at the cabin. We played Uno for hours. I am so happy that I'm married to someone who I can hang out with, just the two of us, play Uno, sit next to each other, read by a fire, make s'mores in the cabin, and just have a grand old time. And it was really, really wonderful and fed my soul. But it was back to reality on Monday, and I don't intend to have any weekend days, any off days until really, frankly, after November 5th. And I don't even think it's going to come on November 6th, because there are a number of states like Arizona who, at this point, the majority of their ballots are mail-in ballots, but per state law, they're not even allowed to start counting them until, I think, on election day. So, however, there are a number of states where we are seeing early voting numbers way to freaking go, Republicans. Listen, for the last year, I have been harping on you guys about getting out to vote, making sure you're registered, bringing friends to the polls with you. And boy, oh boy, you guys have done it. And I am, it's freaking amazing. I love it. I love seeing this. So in Nevada, is one of the states. Also, what was the other state? Pennsylvania, Nevada, and Arizona, no, sorry, Georgia, where we are seeing some incredible early voting numbers. Now, typically in the past, it's Democrats who vote early and Republicans because we're traditionalists. We like to show up on the day of voting, but there is a chance that we could have indicators, pretty reliable indicators before election day of how this thing is going to break, because of the Republican early voting numbers and absolutely record numbers. And it's just amazing to see that people, Dan Bongino always talks about, have things gotten bad enough yet? And it's not that I want things to be bad in this country, but it does feel like the silver lining to things getting bad enough, because I think they have gotten there, is that people are like, yeah, I can't do this. I can't do this. I don't care if she would be the first woman president. I'm not going to do it. So it's been really, really wonderful to see those numbers. To that end, I love the Lochel's cookie tally because I love cookies for one thing, but also I feel like this is just one of those, this is one of these fun indicators. So Lochel's bakery, it's in a town outside of, I believe it's Philadelphia, pretty sure it's Philadelphia, not Pittsburgh. Anyway, so they have this cookie tally. So you can order cookies anywhere in the country and have them shipped to you. And depending on whether I'm on air on election night, I might actually place an order for these, but they have Trump 2024 cookies and Harris 2024 cookies. And as of a few days ago, they posted another update to their cookie tally. And for the Trump 2024 cookies, the tally is 31,988. So just shy of 32,000. And the cookie tally for Harris 2024 cookies is 2,358. So, if there's any indication of that, that is a reflection of what we are going to see in this election, it's going to be good. And, there are some prognosticators out there saying Trump could win the popular vote. I would love to see it. I would really love to see it because I think that would send a very, very strong message to the Democrat Party. And the Democrat Party, it seems like, has been needing a post-defeat autopsy, a post-mortem for a very long time. I thought in 2016, when there was this political earthquake when Hillary Clinton lost, that there would be a little bit of self-reflection for them, but there really wasn't. I mean, they were tweeting through the ratio and doubling down on all of their bad ideas that have really come to a head and manifested in Kamala Harris's campaign. So if Kamala Harris not only loses the election via the Electoral College, but also loses the popular vote, I hope that is a chance for not only the Democrat Party to look at their policies and to see how unpopular they are in this country, but also a referendum on their democratic process this year. Because if Kamala Harris wins, that will send the message to the Democrat Party and frankly the Republican Party too, that they can just drop in a candidate and they don't even have to have the will of the voters via primary votes to decide on a nominee. They can just choose one. The DNC, I mean, this would be like a monarchy. This would be the DNC crowning their person, or, on the Republican side, the RNC doing the same. So I think it's really important that, for many reasons, obviously, it goes without saying, I think it's important for Kamala Harris, for not only Donald Trump to win, but for Kamala Harris to lose, because I hope that causes a bit of a shakedown in the Democrat Party, and they will finally see the error of their ways. All right, final story. I don't even know if this has broken through to mainstream media. I still haven't really seen it floating out there on the legacy media sites here in the United States. Apparently, there is a woman who came out and said that 31 years ago, yes, over 3 decades ago, 31 years ago, that she was at a party and Donald Trump groped her. Isn't it amazing how these ladies just all of a sudden remember these things in Octobers of election years? Anyway, apparently this happened at Jeffrey Epstein's house in New York, except that she claims this happened in 1993. And according to journalists, Jeffrey Epstein didn't even purchase a property in New York or move to New York until 1996. And the story was so questionable that this woman floated the story to CNN, Bloomberg, Axios, and CBS 3 weeks ago, and they all turned it down. This British rag tabloid, The Guardian, is who picked it up. So you're seeing, and the tease of this story, by the way, was apparently Donald Trump groped a minor, and there's video. So that was the tease over on X. Now, the video that they are referring to is just this woman, present day, describing what happened. So not a video of the incident or anything close to that. So, gosh, it really, really feels like at this point, and look, maybe I just have my algorithm on X curated so perfectly that I don't see any content from the left, but that's not true because I see plenty of content from the left. But it just seems like so many people don't care. They literally don't care. And it feels like a lot of people are even at the point where even if it happened, they don't care because they have seen what mainstream media and Democrats have done to Donald Trump. The Justice Department via Joe Biden via the Justice Department has done to Donald Trump. And they're like, you know what? I don't care because my vote for Donald Trump is really just a middle finger to the government. It has nothing to do with Donald Trump. And you know what? If you're one of those people out there who you don't really even like Donald Trump and you don't really care about the policy side of things, you just want to give a middle finger to the government, I'm here for it. Welcome to the party. That's kind of a piece of all of our reasons for voting for Donald Trump. So anyway, all right, everybody, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your weekend. I hope you're having a bit of a relaxing time. I would encourage you all to take Sunday, if that is the day that you observe, as the Sabbath, or maybe it's technically Saturday and you're watching this video the next day, whatever it is, just take a little time to unplug. We have rounded third and we are heading towards home base, only a little bit longer. Make sure you have voted. And if you know people who have not voted, go pick them up, throw them in your car and take them to the polling place. All right. All right, everybody, have a great rest of your weekend and I'll see you on Monday.